I'd like to study with you a piece in the Likutei Halachos in honor of Lag BaOmer. And part of it is textual, part of it is Baal Peh. The Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva died during this period of time between Pesach and Atzeres, but they were tzaddikim gdolim, they were great saints. Their job in this world was to transmit the Torah of Rabbi Akiva, their Rebbe, to the next generation. And their Rebbe, Rabbi Akiva, was the Bechina of Moshe Rabbeinu. In fact, the Gemara says that Lokam b'Yisrael Kamoshe Od, but Rabbi Akiva was Kamoshe Od. That Navi lo haya, there was no Navi like Moshe Rabbeinu, but there was a brilliant Chacham like Moshe Rabbeinu on that Madrega. That's Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara tells the Menachos that Moshe Rabbeinu came to hear the shir of Rabbi Akiva, and it was very difficult for him, Moshe Rabbeinu, to comprehend the Torah of Rabbi Akiva. That's how Rabbi Akiva was so great, and Moshe Rabbeinu had to find out what Rabbi Akiva had in mind. And he declared, Moshe Rabbeinu, Roi shetinasei Torah al yado. So this is the great Rabbi Akiva. What was the barrier that made it impossible for the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva to successfully transmit the Torah of their Rebbe, Rabbi Akiva? Ikar Pgam, the main barrier, shall Talmidi Rabbi Akiva, they didn't have that connection one to the other, that love. Torah ulasakein tzimtzumim v'kelim sheyizku kol Yisrael lekabel orein sof karoi. The Likutei Halachos introduces a Kabbalistic notion of tzimtzum and kelim. The light of divinity is infinite, Ein Sof, or Ein Sof, and the human being, Basher Usham, in his state is incapable. He doesn't have the receptacles to receive something that's infinite because man is finite. And therefore there's something called Tzimtzum. It's like if you have a more mature Rebbe who tries to teach a young child, the Rebbe needs to be mitzamtzem, the seichel ha'elyon, that higher conceptual theoretical knowledge, to bring it down to the level that a child can understand it. And the greater the Rebbe, the greater is his ability to transmit the Torah from high down to low. And this was meant to be the job that was carved out, so to speak, for the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva. They were meant to facilitate a tzimtzum, a process of, in a sense, filtering the high infinite Torah of Hashem, that faith that we have and understanding of the divinity. What could we have when we are in this state of limitation, of finitude? And we needed the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva to function in that capacity, to create those tzimtzumim, those vehicles that would allow the infinite light of divinity to be perceived by their students, the students of Rabbi Akiva. And kol os v'dibur u'parsha shel Torah kedosha, every single letter, every single section of the Torah, every single dibur, speaking words of Torah, has the capacity to create new receptacles and allow for this process of tzimtzum to bring the Orein Sof down to the Talmidim, so that the recipients of those tzimtzumim and those kelim would now have the capacity to reveal God's kingship in this world. And therefore, there's an absolute, profound obligation resting on the shoulders of those who are in charge, who are designated to transmit the Torah Shemal Peh, to work very hard, to come up with new insights, chidushim of Torah, true amitiim chidushay Torah. And kol tzaddikim, and the great leaders and the ksherim of every generation, mitzyagim al zemo, they work very hard to come up with new chidushim. Those new insights represent symbolically the creation, the breakthrough of new kalim, of new tzimtzumim that allow the Torah to be transmitted from on high to this world with the ultimate goal through the Torah of Kabbalas Malchus to accept the kingship of God. The Kol Mashem Eschadech, every word of chidushim, of insight into Doraisa, Nase al Yodo Simtzum, Keli, Lekabel Ulahamchich or Ein Sof Yisbo, Emunaso Umalchuso. So there was a great potential here, and therefore responsibility that fell on the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, the great Rabbi Akiva. If we can only conceive how great Rabbi Akiva was on a level of Chachma parallel that of Moshe Rabbeinu. Here was the opportunity to break new ground, new insights on Chidushim in Torah, so that every word of Torah, every dibur, would be a creation of new tzimtzumim and new kalim to facilitate the ability to create the receptors that would allow the next generation to receive the Torah, the infinite Torah, the Orein Sof from on high. And in truth, Kol Tachlis Olamos, the entire process of creation has one purpose, and that's Bechinas Shamayim Chadoshim V'Aretz Chadosha, Legalos Al Yodom Or Ein Sof Baruch. The process of creation continues. Man is meant to create these new worlds that are parallel to the heavens and the earth, to reveal the Or, that light of Ein Sof. As Yeshayahu Hanavi says, L'toa Shamayim V'Liyosed Oretz. And therefore, Lemar L'tzion Ami Ato, because through these tzimtzumim, we can take Shamayim and bring it down to Oretz, the heavens down to the earth. And to create through these tzimtzumim, through these chidushei Torah, new worlds of Shamayim and Oretz, in order to reveal the divinity of God and His kingship. Then all of Klal Yisrael would be Bnei Tzion that are close to Hashem, and they'll be able to achieve perfection, shleimus. The Lemar L'Tzion Ami At Hashem will declare that the Bnei Tzion are my nation. But Elu Gdolei Tzadikim Talmidei Rabbi Akiva that were meant and charged with a mission to bring the Torah to Kol Yisrael and transmit it to the next generation by being mitaken, new tzimtzumim, new breakthroughs, and to reveal the kingship of God. Aval Havkam Shalahem, but their limitation, their barrier, their blemish, so to speak, was Shlohoya Bahem Av. In order to create these new vehicles and receptacles, we need lahamshich in order to bring the Orein Sof down at the level that is fitting. We need a chibur, an interconnection of love, of common nefashos, rabos miyisrael yachad, in order to receive and create that new Torah that would now be transmitted to the next generation. We need Kalim Rabin. We need the connection of many minds, great thinking, thinkers who would be absolutely brilliant to be able to plummet the depths and reveal new insights, create new worlds of Torah. The Efshar Shiyataknu Ki Echad Ki Imal Yidei Kama V'Kama Lofim Neshama Shemescharvim Yachad Ya'ava. We need the integration of thousands upon thousands of souls. Ki Ish Echad Like at the time of Kabbalah Satorah, as Rashi says, Ish echad vayichan sham Yisrael neged har kulam kish echad, and Chazal say Shuva Hashem revos alfei Yisrael to teach us she'ein hashchina shor al pachos bishnei rivos ushnei alof Yisrael 22,000 in number. We can't bring down that Orein Sof and the Shekhinah to reveal God's divinity they kibbutz only through a massive collection, an integration of nefashos rabos of the masses of Jewish people. Sheyu b'chinas Haminyan, we need to count because every person who's counted, like they counted Bnei Yisrael before Matan Torah or after the erection of the Mishkan, Kidei lahashal Shechina b'neihem. Shechina means that collaboration and that integration of the manyfold, the individual units that come together to form one greater whole. That's what is absolutely critical, the precondition for breaking new grounds, new insights, in new tzimtzumim. And here's where the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva fell short. And therefore, before Shavuos, we read Parshas Bamidbar, which speaks about the numbers of Bnei Yisrael. Chazal say menu v'yitzru, count, and then you'll have atzeres, because Kedushah Shavuos, which is the sanctity of Kabbalah Satorah, can only be created by the total integration of all the individual Jews forming one entity. And therefore, Nistalku Talmidi Rabbi Akiva B'mei Sfira, the days of Sfira preparing and culminating in Kabbalah Satorah Shavuos, are the days in which there's a specific responsibility to create these new tzimtzumim, to be metakein new ways which build Kabbalah Satorah in preparation. Everything depended upon the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva l'takein to establish all these new breakthroughs and transmit the Torah and Malchus Shamayim to the next generation. Based on the Torah that great Rabbi Akiva Rambam, Li'olam, as Rabbi Akiva, as we said, was on the level of a Moshe Rabbeinu. But Pagmu Bazel, Shadei Shalohoya, Ava B'neihem. They didn't have that love to come together as one conglomerate, as one integrated whole, in order to fulfill this responsibility of creating those receptacles, those tzimtzumim. And therefore they died at that period of time, exactly when they failed to live up to their mission. And Ha'olam HaYeshamim, the world was desolate, like the day of Shviras HaLuchos, Acheba Rabbi Akiva V'shana l'Rabosenu shebedaram. And now Rabbi Akiva starts all over again. He goes to the southern part of Eretz Yisrael, and he establishes new Talmidim. And amongst them, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who is going to be the key in transmitting the Torah. But this Chabura, this group of 5 Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, the new group, round number 2, they would be metaken, they would fix up the Hamshachas HaTorah to be metaken the Tzimtzumim, and they would create, again, the number 5 is like the 5 Chumshei Torah, and Ikar Atikun Hoyal Yidei Rab Shimon Bar Yochai V'Chaverov. Rab Shimon Bar Yochai in the Zohar declares Taman Yos Havilumeftal Adman B'Chavivus Atalia. We depend on this Chavivus. And the Chavivus is that interconnection, that love that forged this entity, this group, this absolute unit of one group of people who together would share ideas and Torah together. Al Yidei Zeh lahamshich l'takein u'legalos tzimtzumim nifloim. And this would allow the Torah to be transmitted to the next generation, so that that generation, through these new kalim, these new tzimtzumim, would be able to receive the light of Ein Sof. He wrote on his will that we in turn take this message to heart during these days, coming towards Lag BaOmer, the day in which we commemorate Rab Shimon Bar Yochai and his great Chabur of Talmidim, we should be able to continue creating this Ki'ish Echad, B'Lev Echad, to be Metake in that Gam of Talmidi Rabbi Akiva with a Chabura, with a unit that can receive the Torah on Chag HaShavuos, Keni Ratzon. Amen. Thank you, and have a wonderful